Great. Welcome, Jenny, to the podcast. So this is Jeni Smith, and you're a networking consultant. You're also founder of NetKnow. And if you're looking for networking events as well, you also have the website networkware.com. So tell us a bit more about yourself.
So yeah, my lifelong obsession has been networking. I kind of fell into networking by accident almost 20 years ago now in Liverpool. I was studying down there and doing some voluntary work at a company just to get something on my CV. And the owner of the business took me along to a networking event. No one told me what networking was. And I think like a lot of people, we just kind of get thrown in this room full of strangers and expected to know how to talk to people. And it scared the bejesus out of me. So I hid in the toilets most of the night. But eventually plucked up the courage to go and speak to someone. And I just totally fell in love with it. And a year after graduating, I invented a job where I used to go networking full time.
Yeah.
So I'd go to like 5 or 6 events every day, Monday to Friday, didn't pay for food or wine for like a year, which was great. But I'd go networking on behalf of a lot of different businesses. So quickly learned a lot about networking, building networks. And that's just followed my kind of career journey since then, really. I founded a network in Cumbria, so I used to host events. I was the managing director of the Muscle Club, which is a network over here in the Northeast. I was there for about 3 years. And then, 5 years ago, launched a business which has been set up to essentially just help people get more from networking. So that could be running workshops, teaching networking skills. I'm really passionate about networking strategy. So I help a lot of businesses improve their return on investment from networking activities by helping them put themselves in the right room to meet the right people. Yeah. Depending on what it is that they need from networks. So yeah, a bit obsessed. And a healthy obsession.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it's like finding the right events as well. And I know when I started to do like networking events, I was doing like presentation stuff before, but networking events just felt so different. I had that same sort of experience when I went to like my first one. I didn't really know what to do. Do I just go up to people? I wasn't really sure. I didn't feel like they were always in like a kind of huddle. How do you sort of break into that? That's quite difficult.
Social etiquette changes slightly in networking event environments. Yeah. So it's like the rules are a bit different. Yeah. You're allowed to go up to people and just be like, hi. In Sainsbury's, if you did that, it'd be a bit weird.
Yeah, it feels strange.
So yeah, it's a bit different. So it's a lot of trying to help people. There's a lot of vulnerability involved in networking. Our brains perceive networking event environments and those groups of people, we like perceive them as established tribes and we're the outsider that doesn't belong. So like trying to enter those tribes as the outsider as we perceive ourselves to be, we can potentially experience social rejection, which we're all programmed to fear because it's not nice. You know, we've all got those memories of being that kid at school that the other kids didn't want to play with. And that's how we often see networking events. So there's a lot of emotions to unpick when it comes to networking, as well as obviously then the business strategy side of it as well. So it's often two-sided.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's like just kind of like to just break into a group and say hello. That's what I found quite difficult. Luckily, there's always like seems to be somebody there who sort of like sees somebody just on their own, kind of like myself, and comes over and says, and kind of breaks that cycle. And then I spoke to them about it, and they seem to be like working the room quite well and stuff. I said, how did you manage this? He said, when I was just like you a few weeks ago, just coming to my first event, and I thought, and it just kind of, you just have to start with one and work from there. And I was like, well, if he's got to this position, I can do the same. And it did make me feel a bit more comfortable. So just having that person to sort of say hello first, maybe that sometimes works. But I've definitely tried to help others as well with the same advice, really.
I think sometimes it can feel like a networking event's like the Hunger Games and we're all out there like fighting for resources. But actually, if you can remember that everyone's there to meet each other and look out for each other and kind of take on a bit of ownership of the event and like look around as anyone visibly terrified, then just be nice to each other. That's a big one.
I think that makes sense. It's like looking out for those people who might be finding it a bit more difficult, like I did that first time. But they're very welcoming, inclusive environments. I think just because they're so different to other kinds of events. Yeah. But no, it's great to sort of have that kind of, it is fine. It is okay to go and say hello. And then once you do that the first time, it's a lot easier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so what inspires you? So hopefully you've brought something along.
I have, yeah.
Inspires you. So let's see what
Object first.
Object.
Okay, so I brought a book.
Okay.
So this is, I feel like I'm like Debbie McGee. This is Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart. So this book it's got a number of different levels to it for me of why it inspires me. Should I pop it anywhere or just pop it down?
Yeah.
Have you read it? Have you come across it before?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a wonderful book. So Brené Brown is an academic who her original research was into shame and how humans experience shame. And this book is an accumulation of years of research that she did. And essentially it gives you the language, the words to describe all human emotions.
Okay.
So hence why it's called Atlas of the Heart. Right. It's a kind of like roadmap for how we communicate, how we feel. So as someone who's really passionate about networking, one of my core beliefs is that in order for us to have external relationships and networks, we first need to have internal relationships. So we need to, I'm really big on, I think everyone should go to therapy for different reasons, but we all should, get to know yourself and who you are so that you can then effectively have those external relationships. And being able to communicate who we are and what we need, you need the words to do that. And this is where this book comes in.
Right.
So there's so many, wouldn't know where to start. So many points in that book and I was like, that's the word for that emotion. And even things like the difference between, like we often say the word jealous, like, oh, I'm really jealous. And that's not what we mean. We mean we're envious.
Right.
And there's a difference between the two. And even understanding the nuances of different words that we use in different situations to be able to articulate our emotions is like, I think it's just such a gift to have those words to be able to communicate how you feel. And it impacts all of our relationships, the ones that we have with ourselves, but also with partners and networks and family, and giving that to your kids as well is really big. The other side of this for me is, so I'm 3 years into my PhD, and the research that I'm doing, so I'm at Durham University at the Business School, and my research is looking at how networking can help bridge the gap between academics and practitioners.
Okay.
So there's a big difference between the two worlds, very different. The social etiquette's very different. What success looks like is really different. They play a different game, and the rules are different in the two worlds. But when they come together and they work together and they co-create knowledge, like amazing things happen. Yeah. And I'm looking at how we can, I'm using a methodology called design science, that the output of that is that it's an actual tangible artifact, they call it. So a model that can help the world. So if you've ever come across the business model canvas?
Yes, I have, yeah.
So that was a PhD student using design science methodology, and that was his artifact. So that's, the idea behind it. Brené Brown's obviously an academic, and the majority of academics, they create this new knowledge, but then the world never gets to see it because it's written in journals that are hidden away.
Which they don't read.
And it's really hard to read, Whereas she's an academic, and there's a few others like Sherry Turkle, who's amazing. There's she's an academic who shares her knowledge with the whole world in a way that the whole world can access it. Yeah. So that for me is like so inspirational. That's something that I really want to achieve with my PhD. Yeah. So this book kind of encompasses my passion for networks and human connection, but also my passion for research and making knowledge accessible. So it's two things in one.
That's the best thing. I mean, knowledge is no good if it's not shared, being able to get that in an accessible format that anyone can understand, because that's the best thing. Is what I get from myself is like sharing the things that I know, because it's no good locked inside my head. All that knowledge could be in my head, and that'd be great. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, but it's useless there to everyone else if I'm not sharing it. So I like that these help, and also finding the right words for things as well. Because sometimes you might be feeling a certain way and you say a word, it's like, no, that's not what I mean.
That's not what I mean. Yeah.
I've said that a few times. It's like, and the other person's like reacts differently because you didn't say the thing you actually meant. So just putting the right word to the right feeling. Yeah. That's there's
loads of new words in there, like the emotions and descriptions of feelings and situations and stuff that, I had no idea. But it does. It empowers you to be able to understand yourself whilst also being able to then have that better connection with external relationships.
That makes sense. I guess you have to know yourself first before you can meet other people, because you can understand, okay, this is the way I feel in this situation. Because when I spoke to that person about their first experience, I was surprised initially. I was like, what, you had the same experience as me? And then of course they did. Because when it was their first event, they would feel the same way.
Absolutely.
So it's like understanding that and realizing I'm not so different from all these other people. And it was just that understanding helped me move forward and, improve the way I was dealing from that point on.
And that's where we can connect, and that's where we feel less lonely, and that feeds into her research around shame. When we share our experiences, we find that we're not alone in those experiences, and then we're able to connect, build empathy, which is really impactful. And then it makes us feel less shame about situations potentially, or like feeling like there's something wrong with us.
Yeah.
It's not, we just don't necessarily articulate it.
Yeah. It's just like finding that common ground, oh, that's someone who's gone through the same experience as me. Like a shared experience, like makes it, more tangible, more easier to understand, I guess. So it's like that's just getting over that initial thing, but finding the right words, finding the ways to relate to yourself, and then taking that to relate to others.
Yes,
that's really interesting.
Yeah, so highly recommend. Great book.
So is there any particular part that stands out that you could share?
There's loads of words that it would take me a while. So it's broken down into categories.
Yeah.
So rather than it being alphabetical, like it covers different sections of the human emotions. Yeah, there's not one I think that really like hit me more than another, but I think for me it was more the empowerment that you get from learning the language, the words that you can.
That's
then
the main
use.
thing you can take away from it. That makes sense. And in fact, it's categorized, like you say. So rather than having to look through, okay, what am I looking for here?
Yeah,
it makes it easy to access the things you're looking for.
Absolutely.
As well. Yeah, that's good then. Yeah. That makes sense. Brilliant. So we're talking about things that are inspirational. This is a book that inspires you. What about is there any like a photograph that you have that inspires you?
Well, funny you should mention it, Peter. I brought one along with me. Well, it's quite a big one. It's a big photograph because it's actually multiple photographs.
Okay.
I hope that's allowed.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no choice, to be honest, because it's the only one I've got. So this was given to me about 15 years ago. My mum gave me this. These are all my maternal ancestors.
Oh, what?
So this is my mum, her mum, so my grandma, my great-grandma, and then their mothers in concession. And I can't remember her name. I've got it all written down and I forgot to bring it with me, to be honest. This photograph was taken, she was in her 90s then. It was just after cameras had been invented.
Wow, so that would
yeah, exactly. She scares me a little bit, I'm not going to lie to you. That's a bit of a scary picture. But they all lived very different lives. And obviously following on from her, there's me and my sister, and then I've got a daughter now as well, Juno. So the idea with this, it kind of puts a lot of stuff in context for me. I'll pop it down because it's very heavy.
Yes.
For me, it's, it puts a lot of things in context, like in terms of timelines and history and even just looking at them, one of them, she was a socialite in her era, whereas her mother, worked on a farm. In rural America, they're all American. My mum's American. So that image, this picture hangs up in my hallway, just outside my office when I go upstairs. I've got a home office in the loft. And every time I look at it, it just gives me a little boost.
Yeah.
And it's like all the women who came before me and all the different lives that they led. And
cool.
I'm leading a very different life to my mum, and she led a different life to hers. And hopefully Juno, my little girl, will go on to lead whatever life she decides she wants as
she'll
well.
Have a photo like this with a seventh photo of
she'll
yourself.
Be like this. Modern photos. But the idea is that I'll start a new one for us, and then she can pass that on if she has kids.
That's brilliant. That's a really great. And of course, you see that every single time. So it's inspiring you always then.
Absolutely. My mum's really big on family history, so she's gone back as far as you can in our family ancestry, and she helps other people now with their family ancestry. So she does a lot of research for magazines and all. She's retired, so it's very much a hobby. But she, we found that this is why I've got a tattoo of the Ferris wheel. My 8th great uncle invented the Ferris wheel.
No way.
So that was a cool one. One of my ancestors also one of the witches who was killed in the Salem witch trials.
Wow, really?
So that's a fun fact. I'm also related to Zooey Deschanel, which is a bit cool. If you know who, do you know?
Yes, I do.
From Elf. Yeah. She was on that TV show, Who Do You Think You Are? And one of her ancestors is also one of my ancestors.
It's a bit of a crossover.
Yeah. He was one of the first people to sign the Act Against Slavery back over in America.
It's really important.
And my mum obviously knew his name, so when she watched the show, she recognised him. She's like, "Oh, do you know Zooey Deschanel?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "We're related." I'm like, stop it.
That's amazing to watch
That's
one of those
so
shows.
cool.
And then,
To have a name that you recognize.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. So that's the image, the photograph that means the most to me,
Yeah.
and you know, hopefully something again that I can pass on to my little girl as well.
Yeah, so it's been inspirational throughout the generations in a way, and then it can continue to do so. I guess it's like sort of remembering those who came before you,
Yes,
and the various different things they did, and you know, the things you are doing and the things you don't want to be doing, and so on down the line.
Yeah, exactly.
Dozens of photos and hundreds of years, and never
they've
know,
all got their own stories to tell. Like my grandma, she was my grandparents were missionaries. A bit of a random story, but they met when they were really young, got married at 18, ended up having 7 kids. So my mum was one of 7. When my mum was 2, they moved to South Africa. So my mum she grew up in Zululand on the mission station with the other missionary kids. So she had a very different life, growing up, and ended up married an Englishman and moved to England. That's how she ended up over here. She's been here her whole life. Well, since she was in her early 20s. So her life and her journey, you know, growing up in a mission station where they had no money, they weren't allowed to watch movies or listen to music, or, you know, it was very kind of strict.
Yeah.
And then the life that I've had has been very different to that.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
You know, traveled and starting a business and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting and important, I think, to know and recognize the stories that came before you.
Yeah. I think it is, exactly. It's those stories that can drive you forward. It's not just the photographs, it's the stories behind them.
Yeah,
Sometimes,
exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah. And passing those on.
Yeah. The next generation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. So, you know, you've inspired by an object, which was the book, and you've got the photos as well. So has there ever been like a time when you've been out at a dinner or you've been out for drinks where your inspiration has come from that?
Like lightning hit me.
Yeah.
Obviously, like as a networker, there's been loads of events I've been to where they've had fantastic speakers, and I always try and take something from everyone, and I think everyone has something different about them that is inspirational because everyone's unique and their story's unique, and especially when you're around a lot of people who are very entrepreneurial. I think a big one for me, like a kind of moment, it wasn't like a big event that I'd gone to and someone on stage. For me, it's more the little conversations you have that hit you a little bit. And I remember being back in Liverpool when I was 18, still a student, and having a conversation with someone who wasn't that older than me, and he was running a business.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I was even aware that starting a business was an option, and that it was something people my age could do, and I grew up in a very small village in Cumbria. So I hadn't really seen much of entrepreneurship. You know, my mum was a nurse her entire life. My dad was a postman his entire life. So I wasn't brought up around entrepreneurship. So really having this revelation just from someone casually talking was that really kind of changed my
Made you
perception.
aware of it. Yeah.
And Liverpool and the Northeast, I think, have got so much in common. Very entrepreneurial, very creative. And it was this kind of sense of just go and try it, just do it, just give it a go,
do something different. I guess.
And that really changed kind of my career path and the way I saw opportunities. Really, you don't have to go down the traditional path of a job for life. You can try things, and if it doesn't work, you try something else.
Exactly. Just
and
being
I really
aware
took
of it,
that.
I think, isn't it?
Yeah. And I took that from, rather than that one big moment, rather than that, it was lots of little conversations and being able to, I think this is something that networking provides, is that access to people who are doing things. You can just go into a room and chat to them and find out about what they're doing and then take inspiration from that.
I think so. It's like, it motivates you as well. Sometimes when you're talking to someone, you're thinking, they're not doing something too different from me. It might be a different sector or something, but there'll be something about what they say is like, that rings true to me. It's like you're sort of building a piece from every single person you're talking to, and you sort of put it all together. I know I've done that when I've done like talks and stuff. I've sometimes taken, some like advice from people and thought, that's something interesting. I wouldn't have thght to try that. When I have, it works really well. So it's just like sort of building a puzzle. It's not one particular person,
Yeah.
but it's lots of different people you've spoken to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you say, when people are accessible and you can chat to them,
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, well, if you can do it, maybe I could do it. And it's this kind of like, oh, it's not too crazy. It's not out of reach.
Yeah. And not beyond. It's
makes it realistic.
Yeah. It's not like intimidating, I guess, is it? To sort of like, you can talk to these people, you can talk to people who've just started out in their business. You could be talking to people who've been running a business for years, and they all have these amazing stories, and they're not all necessarily successful as well. There's some of them, they might say things where things went wrong, and I like those honest conversations, those unvarnished like sort of conversations you have where you can really get something from it. It's not just like everything worked out great. That when they're very realistic and go, actually, that's not too far different from me at all. They've become successful, but it's because of the things they've done. Sometimes they didn't work out, and that's good to hear, because sometimes you think, right, okay, I can try something and not be afraid for it to go wrong, because success will come at the end of the day.
And that goes back to what you were saying earlier about, sharing a story. An experience allows other people to connect with it and relate to it and realize that it is normal, it's okay. And again, in business, in entrepreneurship, we only see the very small minority who make it to, your Richard Bransons or whatever. They're a tiny, tiny fraction of what entrepreneurship is, but that's usually all we see. We don't see the years that went in previous or the other successful businesses and individuals who success looks different to them. So it might not be financially millions, but their success could be different. And you don't necessarily hear or see those stories as much. So it's just as important to share them, though.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about what's the definition of success. It's something I've thought about. And it's not necessarily being rich, or being financially independent. It's being like just putting your name out there, just, having, doing something interesting, maybe giving back to the community. Those can be success as well. And I think people sometimes focus too much on the sort of monetary outcome. Sometimes it might just be, I'm helping people, I'm putting something out there, I'm doing something that maybe inspires other people to do something. That can be success as well.
And that goes back to knowing yourself first. Again, if you know what you actually want, you're not going to chase the things that you think you should have. Like often it's money. We glorify raising funding, for example, taking on investment. It's taking on debt, really, or creating jobs. For me, creating jobs would create stress, and I know it wouldn't make me happy. So if you know who you are first, then when you build a business or you're making decisions in any aspect of your life, you can do them authentically rather than chasing that external validation, which often people, we set up businesses and we're like, if I make this much money, then the world will see me as successful. If I create this many jobs, or if I raise 2 million in funding, then the world will love me. And then every single person that I've ever seen give a talk who has gone through that process and achieved those things, they always say it feels really empty. I've never heard anyone say that I got that and then I was happy. Because we just as humans, our natural instinct is to go, right, I've achieved that goal, I've made this much money, but I'm not happy. So maybe I need to move the goalpost. And maybe if I make 2 million instead of 1, or maybe if I make 10 million instead of 2, and and it just keeps getting further and further away. So again, it's that if you know who you are and actually what success looks like to you, then you can chase the right things that will give you that fulfillment and that joy.
It's not like if I have twice as much money, I'll be twice as happy.
No. I think you hear stories, and often the richest people, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm sure they've got access to, like, some of the most luxurious, wonderful experiences in the world. But often you hear how sad they are as people. So
you just think you think they have all those choices, but they really have no choices at all. Some a more humbler person has more choices sometimes than the richest people in the world. I think it's just finding those moments. I know I've had people who, when I've shared something or someone's found something interesting, that's really satisfying to hear back that people have learned something from me or whatever. That is much more interesting. I would much prefer that. Whatever they end up doing from there is great. It's just to have that kind of, it's not necessarily validation. It's just knowing that you've helped someone.
It's impact.
Yeah, it's having an impact on someone, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It does. It really helps, I think. So we're talking about having an impact on people. Has there been a moment where you've inspired someone else?
Ooh. I'd like to think on a daily thing, to be honest. No, there has been people who I've worked with professionally and like done networking strategies for them, and they've ended up pivoting because of that, and then changed their entire business. And, you know, that's a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
But on more of like a personal level, every year I always do a post about the fact that, so I've been sober for it's 7 years this year. So 7 years of sobriety. And I think when you say that, sobriety, it kind of hits people and like, oh, you're like a, you know, what they in their mind see as like a raging alcoholic. And that wasn't the case for me, but alcohol always did have a really negative impact on my life. And I was one of those people that if I had a drink, I would keep drinking. I couldn't have just one. And it took me a long time to realize that. But when I realized that, and I was able to realize I'm an all or nothing, all wasn't working, and it would have eventually taken me to a dark place. So I went for the nothing, and sobriety absolutely changed my life for the better. And thankfully, I chose that path before I became a mum, and, you know, all the wonderful things that have happened since, like, you know, having my daughter, starting the business, doing the PhD. I know that I wouldn't have done were it not for sobriety. So every year on I call it my soberversary, I'll do a little post on social media just to, you know, like celebrate another year. It gives me another like birthday, and I buy myself something fabulous. And every year I get messages of people who are struggling, or they are aware of alcohol, their relationship with alcohol, something, and it's men, women, it's, you know, people who I've maybe not spoken to in years. And there's quite a few people who have decided to try sobriety as well, on the back of me sharing my journey with it. And they've said, you know, it was great to see an honest kind of take on it, that you don't have to be rock bottom to realize that you've got a negative relationship with it, I guess. Yeah. So that that really means a lot, because I know how much it's impacted my life. Yeah. So if I can share a story that's then going to help someone else in theirs, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, because it's like they see someone in a similar situation to them who's made that decision. It might make that decision easier for them. I mean, for myself, I gave up drinking just as a choice. But what I didn't expect was like the challenges from other people. It was like I had no problems with it at all. Yeah. But once I gave it up, it was like that first night out, you know, first company night out I did. And everyone was like,
"Oh, just have one."
And it was like, it never happened before. Normally, people didn't suggest anything. It was just quite the thing. Didn't have that kind of relationship with them, but they were all doing it. And I was like, luckily, it only happened that one time because they got it. I was like, if this hadn't been by choice, but for some other reason, I would have found that extremely difficult to stick with it. But thanks to like just it abated when people realized, and that was the end of that. But it was kind of a glimpse in the kind of pressure you can get, you know, from that. And I didn't realize I had been completely oblivious to it. I just thought, I'll just do this. I'm all right. But the other people it became this kind of issue that I didn't expect. I mean, it quickly went away, but it was the thing that took me by surprise. I didn't expect that at all. And, you know, it's good for those people to make that decision, and good that kind of post is something you do every year, because again, someone might be reading that and think, you know what, I need to, and all the things you've been able to do because of that decision, it might help them sort of realize they can achieve the things that they want.
Yeah. It was really a catalyst for it. But yeah, like 2 months before I quit drinking, and I didn't quit drinking being like, I'm never going to drink again, because the thought of not drinking again scared me a lot. And it was so ingrained in how I socialized with friends and how I spent time with my husband. You know, we'd go, because we didn't have kids, we'd go for meals and we'd get a few drinks. And, you know, I didn't drink every day. It wasn't like that. But when I did drink, the anxiety it gave me, and it just made me sad. And I'm like, if something's making me sad, why am I doing it? So you have to unpick a lot, and it's a very personal relationship with alcohol. That I think everyone has different ones. It's like with food. Some people have got different relationships with food, or, you know, we all have our vices. But when I quit smoking, and everyone was so supportive, and it was like, that's amazing, good for you. You know, I quit cold turkey, just gave up smoking. And then when I quit the drinking, it's same. Yeah. People have a reaction, but I realized quickly that their reaction to me not drinking was nothing to do with me. It was to do with their relationship often. But yeah, it took about a year, I think, for people to kind of accept or get their head around. And also for me as well to kind of realize, do you know what? I'm a lot happier without it. Yeah. So now I need to figure out what life looks like without it. Hence I did like a sign language course and a counselling course, and I had all this time to like, fill my brain with stuff. And then the PhD, and then the business and a baby, and so it takes time. But again, I realised quick it wasn't anything to do with me really. It was to do with how they felt about it.
The thing is about yourself, isn't it? If there's something that's not making you happy that you can get rid of, not easily, because obviously it can be quite difficult, then that's something you can focus on, and then other things can come from that. For my own experience, as different as it was, that was just a brief glimpse into that sort of situation. But after that, it was fine again, and because it didn't really make any difference to me. I was still able to go out. I was still able to go on company nights out.
It didn't make any
difference.
On the dance
it didn't stop anything.
Wedding,
So I was able to do all the things I would have done anyway. It was just what I was doing was just ever so slightly different to everyone else. And once they realized that, they were fine with it. I think that was the thing. You were right. They were thinking about themselves and maybe thinking, "Oh, I couldn't do that," and that was where it was coming from.
Yeah,
because that's why it stopped very quickly, because they realized they're probably just thinking about what they were going through,
absolutely,
rather than what I choose to do or not.
Yeah, I noticed as well. After I gave up, you start to take that step back, and then after having my daughter, realised like there's a lot of messaging, especially for women and mums. This kind of culture around, you put the kids to bed, and it's like 5 o'clock wine, or a lot of like water bottles, could be gin, like that kind of stuff. And I think the intent behind it isn't negative, but there's this subconscious, and even historically, you look at in the 1950s when women were encouraged to be housewives, and if they went to the doctors feeling depressed, the doctors would literally prescribe alcohol and tell them to have a cocktail and it'll calm them down and they'll feel fine. So there's this kind of cultural, especially amongst women and mothers, this underlying like encouragement of using alcohol to kind of suppress their emotions, which I had no idea was even there until I took a step back from it. And then you start seeing it, and then suddenly you see it everywhere.
Because you don't realize, I suppose, it's like it can be ingrained in different parts of society in different ways. There's expectations of a lot of things. Once you're on the outside, you realize, you didn't really notice them while you're kind of in it.
For men, it's like, the lads go to the pub and have a beer, and it's that kind of toxic, but having alcohol as a kind of a way of being able to express your emotions almost. And that, I think so on both, it's not just a women's issue. I think across society, alcohol's very much embedded in different ways. And for a lot of people, it's not a problem. But for a lot of people, it is, but they maybe don't realize it is. Or it's quite a complex thing. But
it's not realizing it's a problem is like the more serious problem in the end of the day. But once you kind of can find a way to deal with that and sort of whatever that might be, then that's where you can sort of move on and make other improvements. It might be that the start of many different things. It might be one small step you take. You might decide to, if it's something you want to cut out every so often, and you eventually just phase it out, whatever it is. Even if it's not something that you're having a problem with per se, you just want to give something up.
Yeah, give it a try.
Give it a try.
Just changing different things. Yeah, love that.
How do you find inspiration? So I was talking about like you look at the photo and it inspires you. Is there any other ways you find inspiration?
So obviously being very deep in the PhD at the minute, I'm reading a lot of different things that I would never have come across. I'm learning a lot of different things, and I always find like inspiration from So I use a concept in my networking strategies called network diversity, which is very much about the idea of engaging with individuals, people, sectors that are so far removed from your areas of interest and expertise that you can take things and apply them to your own work and to your world. So there's a lot of research that's shown that businesses who are built by leaders who have got diverse networks are a lot more financially successful. And often innovation happens when people learn something from a different sector and they apply it to their own, and it can help them innovate. They can become more efficient. But often it's disconnected because they use different language to describe it. So I'm finding within my academic research, there's a lot of things from different spaces that I can pull into business, that I can, they inspire me to look at things differently or approach things differently or apply models and methodologies that are used in like geography. And how can I apply that into business? So for example, at uni, this email went round, it was like a year or so ago now. And it was like, we've got this horticultural day on, and I was like, oh, all my plants are from IKEA or Lego, so like I'm really bad. But I was like, that sounds fun, I'll go along. And I went along, and it was like this group of people who were like, salt of the earth. They, had boots on, like outdoorsy, garden, people. And I'm there like, hi, like in a pink coat or whatever. And very visually, I was the outsider. But I went in and I was like, look, I know nothing about this, so bear with me. Like, I'm really keen to learn. And they were so excited to show me all of these things that they were passionate about, that they loved. So we were talking about like natural ecosystems and, plants and things growing. And they talked about how often when someone gets, if you get a patch of land and you want to grow like food.
Yeah.
People will go in and they'll go, right, I love cauliflower, so I'm going to grow cauliflower. I love peas, so I'm going to grow peas. And they plant all the stuff that they love. But actually what you need to do is you need to take time and look at that land and really kind of take in, right, this time of day, that section gets really wet because this comes down from the river or whatever. That's really shady. So that, that bit wouldn't work for certain things. And really look at the resources and the space, and then plant things that would work there rather than things that you want. Yeah. And I was like, that is so applicable into business ecosystems and how, the rest of the world's trying to recreate Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
But the variables that were like came together for Silicon Valley to happen where it did, when it did, the actors involved, the land, the physical geography of it, all these things, you can't replicate it. So instead, you should kind of take a step back and look at what's already thriving, what's already working there, and then lean into that. And so I find inspiration from like loads of diverse kind of knowledge and insights. And again, that's another thing that networking provides, putting yourself in a room where you really don't belong. Like I did not belong in that room at all. And we naturally we find it easier to network with people that think the way that we do. We use the same language. This is the idea of birds of a feather flock together. It's called homophily. But if you can be courageous enough to kind of step out of that comfort zone and maybe think, right, so you're like super embedded in tech. So what is so far removed from that like cookery or something? I don't know, something random. Like, and just it not only builds your personal confidence, and it's great for you when you meet new people, but you also get all these additional insights that you could potentially take back to your space and share them there as well. So, yeah.
It's like different perspectives. I think I know I did something many years ago. It was like where they brought techie people and like artists together. It was like the Culture Code Initiative.
Oh.
And that was the first time I'd sort of met people like that. And we were just having sort of like strange conversations about how you could play around. 3D printers were quite new at the time. We were talking about those and saying, what could you do with those? Could you make a 3D printer play music and stuff like that? It was all sorts of crazy things. But I think it started a thought process, because what they decided to do is they did decide to use a 3D printer, but to print objects, but the parameters of the objects, like its height and its width and its shape, were like levels from the River Tyne. So it was like the salinity levels, the flow levels, and they were using these pieces of data to feed in. So the jar would be a little bit wider if it was a little bit more salty, it'd be a little bit taller if it was a little bit more flowing, and all these factors. And it was just like this. I was like, how did you think to do that? That was way beyond what we were talking about. But it was just that taking things to the next level, and just that kind of, here's someone who was mostly doing art and stuff, thinking about using a technology that was, it was pretty new at the time for generally use anyway. And it was just interesting to see where they took it in a way that I didn't even think of that. It was really exciting to see someone's perspective. And I think they went on to do a PhD related to looking into that.
Oh, I love it. See, this is where magic happens, honestly, when you get these two or more groups of people together who think differently, and they all come to the table with all these different insights and experiences, and the way they see the world is different. And this is where, like, obviously co-creation, as I said, my PhD sits those, if I can help them come together. Often it's building empathy because you don't understand each other. But spending time together.
Exactly.
Like you got it with the artists and so if you can look for opportunities like that or create them yourself.
Yeah. It was just a chance to chat with someone that you never would get a chance to otherwise.
Yeah.
And I remember they brought all sorts of people to talk. One person had designed a data visualization tool And I was like, oh, that sounds really techie. But they used it to lay out the names on the World Trade Center Memorial because it was really important to have those set out in a particular way.
Right.
And I was like, I never thought of that. And I was applying something. I thought, I didn't see the connection there, but they talked about this process. And I was like, I was applying tech to produce something that was really moving and really fitting.
Yeah.
I just thought, that's cool. Using technology in ways I hadn't even considered and combining that with creativity. It definitely made me think more creatively, but just bringing these kind of disparate groups together. Yeah. And a lot of things came from that. It was pretty amazing to see these two groups who never would have, but having that common framework, this event to talk to, that was what, and I think just that chance to, talk to different people, that's what makes it interesting, I think, isn't it? And that's where you can make those kind of connections, and you might be someone you work with, or I've made connections where it's not something I knew about myself, but I went to a different event and someone's talked about the same thing and said, you two should meet.
Yes.
So that's when you can make those indirect connections.
This is where we start increasing our social capital. Yeah. So when you can add in value to people and you position yourself at the center of your network where you network your network.
Yeah.
That's really, really powerful. And people want to tap into that. So you increase your value in your network and your own ecosystem. And then more people will invite you to things because they want to tap in and build a relationship with you. And they want you to do that for them. And then reciprocity kicks in. So every person that you help, we're ingrained to want to do that favor in return if we can, if the opportunity arises, or sometimes we'll do it proactively. One, to return it, but also to hope that you keep giving me those referrals. Yeah. So this is where all the network thing comes. I love it. Don't get me off on a tangent.
It's built. That reputation, isn't it? Sort of making those connections, even if it's nothing I know about myself. I mean, it happened even at the same event. There was someone talking about industrial automation, and I was like, that's very specific, and how they were applying that. And I spoke to someone else at the same event saying, I want to speak to people who are doing industrial automation and stuff. I was like, well, there you go. Again, said, you go over there and talk to them, because it's just you just never know who you might talk to. Whereas some people might talk to someone and go, what do you do? And they say industrial automation. Well, I don't do that. And
then they're out.
They're out, not realizing the value they can have to someone else.
Yes.
I mean, I'm thinking it was an interesting thing to talk about anyway, because I like a different sorts of things. The fact I could then use that to help someone else and make a connection there. Yeah. Someone might have just walked away from that and not realized.
This is the strength of weak ties. Yeah. One of the foundational papers is called, and it's the idea that me and you might never work together. However, your value to me is actually more embedded in your wider network. Yeah. So we might never work together, like industrial something, or, it's not a right fit. However, your clients or their clients could be your target market, vice versa, if that makes sense. So it's that strength of the weaker ties rather than that strong tie that can often be the most valuable.
That makes sense.
And you're right, because people often just short term, no, next person.
They don't see that that value. They're looking for that short term value. Want someone who's relevant to them only, and they're walking away from somewhere where they might make that connection, and then that person might make a connection for you.
Absolutely.
And then you've got the value you wanted after all. And I think that was something that I didn't really realize was a thing, but just kind of inadvertently fell into this kind of, making these kind of connections. And it turns out they were quite valuable to other people. It's a whole thing. I didn't realize that.
Oh yeah, there's loads of, I can send you some papers to read if you want anytime.
That's cool. I was applying a networking process without even realizing it.
Network theory. Congratulations.
I didn't even know it.
You didn't even know it. Amazing. You're a natural. Yes.
Oh gosh, I was applying it. I didn't even know what it was. I didn't have a word for it.
There you go.
Yes.
See, once you're having the words for it, or knowing that it is a thing and it's not just you. A lot of people I work with networking, they'll naturally do these things, but because either they don't see it as, I think sometimes they feel a bit guilty, like, oh, I'm not getting any immediate value back from it, or this isn't what networking is. They almost need someone to give them permission to continue to do that, as it is a form of networking. Yeah. It's a massive form of networking. If you can network as an act of service to your existing network, so going into an event, not being like, right, what can I take from this? But going in either, what can I learn from these people? Yes. Or who in my network would benefit from meeting someone in this room, and looking for the connections. Because when you do that for your network, or you do that for your customers, super way of embedding loyalty and, deepening connection, stimulates reciprocity, and it adds so much value to you by looking for opportunities for others
Yeah, I think it makes sense. It's all done that sort of wanting to share what you know and sharing those connections as well. I just felt it was an extension of that. It's just
absolutely.
like I might know someone who knows someone. Of course, I usually do it the other way. I'll say I actually know someone who might know some of the kind of people you need to speak to, and then that's like I'm still helping them in a way as I can't help you myself, but I know someone who might.
Yeah.
That is then they're getting vibe from that, and I can walk away and think, well, I did my bit, and then if they do come back and say, you know what, I made a really valuable connection there, then I was like, I help facilitate
that little pebble and the
you never know
that come away from it.
Never know
paying it forward. Yes, exactly.
Brilliant. Let's talk about what advice for finding inspiration. So if you wanted to sort of like tell people how they could go about their own sort of inspirational journey or whatever, what kind of advice would you give to people?
Start with therapy, as I said. Definitely go to therapy. No, I do honestly believe that in order, the first starting place for me is that relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
So whether it's therapy, whether it's just kind of, reflexive, some people like journaling or whatever it is, really invest in getting to know who you are, what you want, what you need, what works for you, what doesn't, why, and then start addressing any things that need to, for me, sobriety changed my life, loads of things that came off the back of that and that I've figured out about myself.
Yeah.
That allowed me to then spot, I guess, inspiration and act upon it as well. I think there's a difference between like, I'll see people doing things that I really admire and I think that's absolutely amazing. Do I want to do that as well? Absolutely not. Like, do I want to like become, a professional athlete or something? No, I don't. However, I admire it.
Yeah.
And I can see, I think finding people who have got commonality in their journeys with you, that's a really fantastic source of inspiration that can stimulate action, I think, on the back of it. But yeah, the first place for me to start is that personal relationship with yourself.
Like introspection first.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's when the external relationships come. This is why I've got one of my tattoos is a chair. Sherry Turkle that I mentioned earlier, she's an MIT professor. She's written loads of books on human connection and she focuses on the digital adoption and how the digital adoption has impacted our ability as humans to build empathy.
Yeah.
So she studies mostly like 16 to 18-year-olds and how they communicate through screens, which means that, if you're horrible to someone through a screen, you don't see the consequences of that.
Yes.
So you don't build the empathy that would come if I was horrible to you and I saw you visually get upset.
Right
then I feel bad. And it's the feeling bad that makes you not behave that way and build empathy. But because they don't see the consequences of it.
Right.
So she's got a number of books and one of them's called, we've got Reclaiming Conversation and the Empathy Diaries. And Reclaiming Conversation on the cover is this single chair. And it comes from a poet who talked about how in his house, he has 3 chairs. He has 3 chairs for the 3 represent community. So you've got you and 2 others. But before you can have 3 chairs, you need to have 2. Yeah. And that's for friendship. So that one-to-one relationship. But before you can have the 2 chairs, you need to start with the 1 chair. And it's that solitude. And because we spend so much time in our screens, we don't have time with our own thoughts as much. We're forever, even if you're in the car, you're listening to the radio, if you're in the house, you've got a screen on, the telly, we don't really have time with our own thoughts to process, to understand ourselves. So that's where the idea with the singular chair of solitude comes from, to spend time on your own, just to get to know yourself. Yeah. And that could be in therapy or it could be on a beach, it could be whatever it is. But yeah, that for me is where it all starts. And then everything good comes off the back of that.
Yeah, so it's like building that sort of base yourself first, and then that'll allow you to relate back. Because then not only will you understand yourself, you can apply, other people are going to be the same as me, so I can apply a lot of that to when you're engaging with other people as well.
Absolutely. You'll get triggered by things, and once you know who you are, you know why you get triggered by certain things, certain environments, situations, certain people. Once you know why, then you can control it, you can adapt to it, and you can address it. But until you know that, you're just going to continue to, either exclude yourself from things or,
exactly.
you know,
just not bother, you know, not good.
I don't belong there. I'm not good enough for that, or whatever we tell ourselves. And there's a reason why we tell ourselves those things. You got to figure out the why first.
Yeah. If you stop asking, like, what's the point of going to something? It's just X and Y is going to happen. But then when you actually do it, you always feel better. You always feel like, why did I think that way before I went? So it's like understanding those feelings, finding the words for them, and kind of, you know, try dealing with them. Or if there's something you need to eliminate or change, you work on that, and that'll help you progress. And then you'll find everything else just that bit easier, or at least it's one less thing to worry about.
Absolutely. Oh, we've just solved everything. There you go. You're welcome, everybody. You're all set for life now. This therapy.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like, not only is it about inspiration, it's about just finding like yourself, finding about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Inspiring yourself.
Yeah.
Doing the things that, if you see someone else that's inspirational, this is one of the reasons why I started a PhD in the first place, or started a business. I saw other people doing it, and I was like, what is it about what they're doing that I think is inspirational? And then you go, right, can I do that? Do I want to do that? Is that something that I could and want to do? And if the answer is yeah, then do it. Exactly. And then it incites that action.
I think when you find out about more of those things, you realize that's something I can do too.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's like giving up alcohol or making any kind of change, it's like you realize when someone else has done that thing that I could do that too, then that's something you can do. And then if there's anything else, you can maybe overcome those as well.
Absolutely.
That's brilliant.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you.
No, my pleasure.
Great. So that was a fantastic episode. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
So yeah, thanks for watching Talking Inspiration. You can subscribe and like any episodes. And thanks again. This was Talking Inspiration.
Niltoni Broadcast Network, NBN. Popcorn for your ears.